Well, good morning, everyone, colleagues from far and wide. Welcome to this ASCILITE webinar on getting your papers accepted at ASCILITE 2019. My name is Dr Julie Willems. I'm the facilitator for this webinar and currently serving as part of the ASCILITE Executive. Today's session is part of the ASCILITE webinar series this year. And for this morning's webinar, I'd like to introduce Rebekah Lim. Rebekah is Associate Professor and Director in the Teaching and Learning Centre at Singapore University of Social Sciences, or SAS, and she's also the co-chair of ASCILITE 2019. So big warm welcome to Rebekah. ASCILITE 2019, ASCILITE 2019 will be held in Singapore from the 2nd to the 5th of December 2019. And Rebekah is going to discuss with us the conference streams and things to consider when writing a submission for the conference. And just a reminder, folks, if we can mute our microphones while Rebekah's talking, just so we don't get feedback in. The session is being recorded, and I'm going to monitor the chat, and then we'll have a chance for questions and answers at the end. So at this point, I'm going to pass over to Rebekah.
Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you for the nice introduction, and a very warm welcome to all the participants and our colleagues. Thank you for taking time to listen in and join into this webinar. And given that we have only, say, about an hour, we'll jump straight into the short sharing. And thereafter, I think I hope to leave a little bit more time where we can do a question and answer. So in the meantime, I suggest that perhaps you could just hold your questions in case it's addressed along the way as I do my short sharing. So let's get started. So first up, I will be sharing with you the conference streams for this year's in Singapore. And there are 6 main streams here that we have developed. And if you were to look at the first 2, for example, visions and explorations in digital learning, as well as practices and challenges in technology-enhanced learning. For these 2 themes, it's really about hardcore edtech kind of stuff, where we look into the emerging technologies that we are using in our fraternity. And for the second theme, for the second conference theme in particular, we are looking at the actual implementation experiences and as well as reflections. So for these 2 themes, conference streams 1 and 2, sorry, I would say the focus is really more on the hardcore edtech kind of stuff that many of our research as well as our implementation practices are based on. For conference streams 3 and 4, I would say these are ideas or streams that are more prevalent in the recent years. And in particular, if you look at digital competencies, which is stream 3, in this day and age with social media and a lot of formal and informal and non-formal learning environments coming into play, we are looking at digital competencies, including areas on citizenry and so on and so forth, and work too. So that's something that we are widening the scope of the areas of research and publication to include more on the non-formal and informal learning environments. And for the 4th stream, it's on data analytics. I understand that colleagues in Australia have been looking at this for a while. This is still an important and interesting area of research and publication for many of us in Singapore, as well as in the region, in Malaysia, Taiwan, Hong Kong. So we've kept this stream in 2019, this year's conference as well. So that's for stream 3 and 4. And for stream 5 and 6, I would say these 2 streams pertain more to what we in SUSS, Singapore University of Social Sciences, stand for, which is really the focus on the social mission, on the social impact side of things. So, and with that, we do look into, or at least it is in the interest of SUSS to look into continuing education throughout life. Lifelong learning has always been our mission, and we do look and study lifelong learning by way of inclusive education very, very closely here. So that's something that's very close to our hearts. And of course, for Stream 6 as well, in the use of technology as a catalyst for social impact, and that really we like to see the use of technology in a way, including but beyond teaching and learning, to really make a difference in society for social impact. And that's what Stream 6 is about. And we welcome, papers and submissions to any of these 6 streams. Of course, you may have a question that if your publication or your submission does not very neatly pack into any one of these, I would suggest go for something that you think has the closest match to what you have in mind, and you feel free to still submit the paper. And if you do have further doubts, if what you have in mind right now fits into any of this, feel free to write in to us, to the Secretariat email that we have on the ASCILITE 2019 website. So move on to something that all of us are very interested in, as we come into this webinar, which is really to look at what are the writing standards that we are looking out for. So I've picked out 4 main criteria or areas that on screen that you see on screen right now, and I'll elaborate each one of them in some degree of detail. So let's start with the first one on conceptual quality. And so on really in this criteria, in this focus area, we are looking for 2 things: review as well as the methodology. So on review, we are looking out for clear, relevant review, and this applies to both the long as well as the concise papers. In fact, for the other submissions as well, such as the panels and the workshop submission. So we are looking for a clear, relevant review. And by good review, we are actually looking out for more than a summary. A good review should actually use literature to augment your position in your paper. The stance that you're taking in a paper. So a good review is more than just a listing and a description of what we've read, but that it should really be using those references and those literature to augment the position that you are taking in your paper. So that's what we look out for in a good review. And on the method of study, it obviously should be clearly described, because essentially, as with any publications, whether it's to a conference or to a journal or to a book chapter, the purpose of a good description of a methodology is such that a reader or a colleague in the larger fraternity is able to replicate or appropriate the study in another context. So that is important, having your research study clearly described. But essentially, and that's what I have highlighted on screen, as in essentially at the end of the day, reviewers do not look at it in a discrete fashion. So typically when it comes to conceptual quality, reviewers do look out for the coherence of the literature and the arguing of it, leading to the methodology side of things. So it is really the tying of the two and how nicely one leads to another that reviewers look out for. So essentially, if you were to, paint, as you paint the need of your study, of your research, and and as it moves on in your description to how you are studying it, typically for reviewer is taken as a whole. So yes, that logical, that appropriate link from research, literature to methodology is something that reviewers do look out for. So I move on to the second criteria, and that's really on the originality and innovation side of things. So by originality, we are looking out for a new idea, or it could be an existing idea, but it's applied in a new context. In fact, I would stretch it even to say that if it's a study that has new insights to an existing phenomenon, and it could be due to certain conditions that are new, unique, that hasn't quite occurred in the past, or hasn't quite been documented in literature. That's also something that I would consider as original. And by and large, my sense is that um, if and when we have read enough of literature in the field that we're writing on, chances are you would have a pretty good sense on the originality of your work. And I think by and large that it's quite straightforward once we've read enough in the field that we're writing on. So that should be fine. Essentially, on originality, I think reviewers are also looking out for this idea of, is this sufficient, as a contribution to the field and to the conference? So I think it will also help if you have a look at the proceedings of the past conferences, and that's the beauty of ASCILITE, because we do have all our proceedings nicely documented and published. So do have a look, and you might also see and find areas of a similar strand or area that to what you currently have in mind, and it's good to reference them as well as to see how you slightly different from what has been documented already. Okay, and let me move on to the third area on clarity and coherence. And this is essentially the language side of things. So writing well is really, really important. I cannot emphasize on this more. And that when we say, when we mean writing well, it's really more than just using big words. It's really about this idea of comprehensible language. And essentially, the reader, and first and foremost, the reviewer, must be able to follow you in your writing, because all your thoughts and your ideas are mediated in and through the writing that the reviewer and the reader gets access to. So writing well is really, really crucial. The argument has to be coherent, so it has to come across clearly in the writing. And for instance, if you're talking about let me just use an example. Let's say if a paper is about student motivation, and that has to be consistently brought out throughout the paper. And sometimes in some of the reviews that I do, I sit on the editorial board of Pedagogies, which is a Taylor and Francis journal, as well as a Springer book series. And sometimes when I look at reviewers in general, papers and submissions in general, some of these ideas like student motivation, for example, that in the gets carried away to student participation, to student engagement. Well, so many of these constructs are similar, but not synonymously the same. So, this whole idea of coherence has to be brought through consistently throughout a paper. And it helps by reading and rereading your paper to make sure that what you're talking about, you stay focused, and it stays focused throughout the paper. Okay. So essentially, the last point here that I wanted to mention is that if a writing is poor, a piece of writing is poorly done, unfortunately, no matter how good the research idea is, it is a waste. So as I mentioned, research ideas is mediated by writing. So you know, I cannot emphasize enough having a comprehensible language, clear and coherent argument throughout the paper is utmost important. Okay, and finally, I'd like to move on to the last area, and that is the interest to delegates in general. And I think for this, it really helps, again, like as I mentioned, to look at the proceedings, to see what has been published in the past, and that reviewers are looking out for the extent of the paper stimulating discussions and engagement. And on this, I just want to kind of like sum up the writing standards, and that do bear in mind, reviewers look at this, look at a paper and make an evaluation um, as an overall recommendation. So you might be wondering, are there some criteria that are more important than others? Very often, it is not the case of one over the other. It is an overall recommendation that the reviewer makes. In fact, I would say that the criteria are interrelated, and therefore, all areas, are equally important in having a paper accepted. So with that, perhaps I could take more questions later on writing standards. And in the meantime, I will move on to my next slide, which is really to show you some examples of what makes a good piece of writing. And the two examples that I'm going to show you are drawn from the best papers of the ASCILITE conference from the past years. So let's look at this first one, which is an abstract. This is a very tight abstract, very nicely written with a lot of information in there. So let's unpack this a little. If you look at the first sentence, straight up, this abstract goes straight into the problem statement. It says, despite widespread implementation of initiatives to support student transition, this research reports something. And that what it reports, and the problem statement here is, it still lacks awareness of expectations and preparedness for study. So right in one sentence, that whole problem statement is very nicely articulated, and it leads on to the next sentence, the second sentence, which is, it goes straight into, in this paper, what are we reporting? We're reporting on the design and the development. So it says, you can see now there are two aspects that, as a reader, you can look forward to reading, and that is the design as well as the development of what? Of an online adaptive diagnostic module. And essentially, this module helps students to do certain things, which is further elaborated in that one sentence. So again, you can see that in one sentence, it articulates very clearly what the paper aims to report on. In fact, if you were to go further down in the next sentence, there's some level of elaboration, which is what the study is about. It says the module was designed to, 1, gather evidence, 2, personalize enough to maximize opportunities for students to reflect on, and 3, be scalable and sustainable enough within resourcing constraints. So, it gives you, in another sentence, more details about what the research and the study is based on. And thereafter, it switched straight to the report of the findings, which you can see in that sentence that I highlighted. Preliminary learning analytics indicate that this approach allows students and teachers to do something, and in this case is to measure current learning. And in fact, in the same sentence, as a reader, you get alluded to that on the methodology of the study, which is, in case it is a survey study. In fact, from this sentence alone, you also know that the sample size is 402. And finally, it wraps up the whole, the abstract by having some sense of the significance of the study. In this case, is that this particular environment and research can be embedded and adapted for different contexts. So you can see in this abstract is very tightly written. It brought the reader through the problem statement, to what you're reporting on, to details of the study, as well as the findings, and methodology, to a little bit on the significance of the study in the last sentence. So this is, I would consider, a good abstract that has got a lot of information in there, very informative. Okay, and the next example here that I will be showing you is actually an introduction. So again, this is from another best paper. I think this was from 2017. And again, you see that it's very, this is very clearly written. And this particular paper talks about a study that is part of a larger study. So in the introduction, it's very clearly painted for the reader how and what the smaller study is about, which is reported in the paper. And at the same time, it's given enough details of the larger study such that it's very clear in the reader's mind how what is used in the small study, which is being reported, and how it sits in the context of the larger study. So you can see here that straight up in the introduction, it says here, in this study described in this paper, it is about the use of metaphors as a window to understand student experiences, and further details are given about the study, that how this is a commission project, and specifically it goes on to also talk about the research questions as part of the larger study. In fact, what I could not put on screen was that after this paragraph, there were, some level of description of what the larger study is about, that makes it very clear for the reader when he or she comes into the next section, which is for the purposes of the secondary study, which is what you see on the right of the screen right now. It becomes very clear when a reader comes to that paragraph that, oh, okay, this secondary analysis and how it's part of the larger study. And obviously, from the research question, in the introduction section, it moves on to what the paper is reporting, which in this case, it is the thematic classification of the metaphors, and how it not only aligns to the conference theme, which is me, us, and IT, but also it aligns to theoretical conceptions, particularly those of the community of inquiry, the COI model from Garrison and Van Gogh. So you can see that, it's very clearly, staged from in the introduction section of how this particular paper is a smaller study of a larger study and how they are interrelated. So this is a very nice introduction and written up that gives the reader a clear sense what he or she is to expect as one moves on to the literature, which in this case it's really more about metaphors and use of metaphors to understand student experiences. So yep, I've taken about 20 over minutes, which is what I had planned for. I do want to leave some time for question and answer. So let me just show my last slide. These are some resources that you might want to go into. They are readily available if you want to just Google for it. The first one is actually about abstract, and the second one is taken from ER. And I personally found the second one very useful, which I use a lot for my classes as well when I teach. And that's from although the context of it is ARA, but it is relevant in terms of standards, on reporting on our work and our research. And with that, perhaps I could turn this over to you. And if you have questions, you could perhaps start typing them in the chat. If you could draw out the chat on the right below, and we could get talk a little bit more about the conference streams, or if you have queries or questions on the writing aspect, yeah, you could park it out on the chat.
Thanks, Rebecca. Just while people are thinking of questions, and Todd's typing at the moment, just a reminder that Rebecca has said if you've got any specific questions, directing you back to the Singapore 2019 website, but also to email the Secretariat for further questions. And a reminder there that the four main criteria for review are going to be conceptual quality, originality and innovation, clarity and coherence, and interest to delegates. Rebecca, a question to you. This PowerPoint, were we going to make it available?
Oh, yes, definitely. So how do we email to colleagues directly, or do we put it on the ASCILITE website?
Perhaps if we, because Andre has a list of attendees, perhaps if we get the, yes, if we ask Andre to send out to those participating today.
Ah, wonderful. Let's do that, yes.
Yeah. So if we just PDF it, and then at least it's got the criteria, and also it's got the 6 different streams as well.
Yes, thank you. Yes, let's do that.
All right. So just watching Todd. Can you see the chat? And Dan's also got a question too.
Yeah, I see Dan is writing.
All right. I'll just mute me again and.
Right. So yeah, we've got a question from Todd, and so you would like more clarification about the conference theme, specifically that's personalized learning, diverse goals, and what? That's a very good question. I did not really talk about the theme per se. So this idea of personalized learning, it's really dovetailing the state of technology that we are experiencing today, and that a lot of the state of technology these days is it's more than just connecting learners, but with analytics, with artificial intelligence, that whole ideology of using technology to personalize learning, which is something that, for those of us who do research in ed tech, something that we have been working on and striving towards. And these with analytics, with artificial intelligence, that goal of making learning more personal, more targeted is becoming more of a reality than what it is that in the past. Then so that's the idea of personalized learning. Diverse goals is it is connected to stream 3 and stream 5, which is this idea of continuing education and lifelong learning. So as I shared earlier, that SUSS is a university that caters to learners of all age groups. So we've got students who come to us straight from high school. We've got students participating in education from 30s to 40s, and we even have learners who are 60 years old coming to our system as a continuing education learner. So with diverse, groups of students participating in education comes as goals. And really, again, I think this idea of using technology to access and to give access and to cater to a whole range of students, as well as to meet a whole range of diverse goals, is a good goal to aim for. And that's the part about the diverse goals. And finally, one heart, which is related to stream 6, and that is I think no matter, whether we're a developer, whether we're an educational developer, or whether we are a faculty teaching or research, and that is, we're common in one heart, and that is to actually achieve good learning for all our learners, and that's the bit about the social impact side of things as well. So that's the conference theme, which is really to address the technology bit in personalized learning, the diverse goals bit, which is to look at it from the whole range of learners that that come through us, and the one heart bit, that's really the bit that aligns all of us in our mission to achieve good learning. And I hope that answers your question, Todd. And thank you, thank you. And from Dan, is it possible to have a copy of the recording? I think so. I think it's our practice to make the recording, in fact, both the recording as well as the PowerPoint, available to colleagues. So yes, I think they will be made available. Do we have other questions? More from Dan, I think. Yeah. Oh, yep. You're welcome. Thanks. Thank you, Dan. Do we have other questions from colleagues? Perhaps I could go back to the slide on criteria if it helps you, just to help you to frame. If you have your questions or comments, do we have any comments pertaining to the question, pertaining to submissions? We've got Priscilla typing something now. Yes, thank you, Priscilla. Thank you. Thanks for the information.
Rebekah, I've got a question with regards to weighting on the review criteria. Has that been set?
We are in the midst of finalizing it, and yes, and currently I believe it is an overall, it's not firmed up, but I believe it is an overall recommendation that we are looking out for. So I do not think there is, we are looking at specific weights or heavier weights in any particular dimension. But that is to become, is that your question, Julie? In terms of weighting?
Yes, it was, Rebekah, and thank you. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Julie. Do we have other questions from colleagues or comments? Do you experience any difficulty or challenges with the submission? No?
Rebekah, just perhaps talk folks through the submission process once they've got their abstracts, not only their abstracts, but their short papers, concise papers, full papers, etc. When they've got them ready, just talk us through that, please.
Sure. So we do have the usual formats, what we typically have in the ASCILITE. We've got the full papers that are 10 pages long, or a max of 10 pages. The concise papers are 5 pages. And for workshops, there are 3 pages maximum. For panel, as well as the experimental reports, there are 2 pages for submission. And finally, poster and packet pictures are 500 words long. In terms of the system, we are using EasyChair, which is the system that we've been using for ASCILITE for some years now, I believe. So it should be fairly straightforward for colleagues who have experience submitting. If not, for colleagues who are submitting first time to ASCILITE, if you do experience any challenges with the submission, please do write into the ASCILITE 2019 email, and we will respond to you. Generally, our response time has been, our turnaround is quite swift. Give us 24 to 48 hours and you should hear from us regarding your question or your query. You're strongly encouraged to use the templates there on the website as you write your paper. So we've got templates for all the various formats. Again, these are templates that we've used for past years. So I strongly encourage to do that, because if your paper is submitted, let me say this again. If your paper is accepted, it would really help in terms of publishing the proceedings when the paper is aligned to the template. So do use the templates. I think it's something that that will help us a lot, and it will also help you because the templates has got the headings and all that nicely set up. So it will help you and guide you in the flow of your writing as you progress. And we've got a question from Esther, and on the full submission deadline, yes, it is on the 26th of July. No, it's not just the abstract, it's the full submission for whichever format that you choose to submit. So we've got another 3 weeks or so to go, which you're still in time to write something. Yeah, so do submit. Do submit, do come for it. Yes, you're welcome, Esther. Thank you. Yeah, we've got something from Hazel coming up. Oh, Hazel, you're going to run to another meeting. Thanks for dropping by. Hope this helps. All the best. All the best for your submission. And thank you, Todd. Thank you. Yeah, we've got something for Kirsten coming up as well. Oh, everybody has to run. No worries. Thank you for dropping by. Thanks. Hope this is useful. Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Thank you. Thanks, Kirsten. Great. Yep. Thank you, Priscilla. Thanks. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Sue.
So, well, I'll do a wrap up then, I think, Rebecca. So,
yes, please.
Yes. So, colleagues, thank you so much for participating in today's webinar. On behalf of ASCILITE and everyone attending, thank you also to Rebekah Lim for sharing with us this morning. We hope that you have found the session useful, and we also refer you back to the conference website, ASCILITE 2019, and also to the email that's available there for any questions that you have. And as Rebecca has said, the turnaround time for response is usually 24 to 48 hours. So best wishes as you prepare your submission for ASCILITE 2019, and hope to see you in Singapore in December 2019, 2nd to the 5th of December. So on behalf of us all, thank you. Rebecca, if you want to stay on the line, I'll just stop the recording so we can chat. And
yes.
Sue, we look forward to seeing you in December. All right, I'm just going to stop the recording now.
Yeah.
And Rebecca, it seems that I can't stop the recording.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julie. Thank you.
I'll jump out and I'll continue our discussion on WhatsApp.
Yes, we will. Thank you. And thank you all. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.